Audie Murphy was more than a Hollywood star. He was a real-life war hero, decorated with every military combat award for valor the United States could give. He became a living legend long before he ever stepped in front of a camera. To millions, Murphy was the perfect symbol of courage, discipline, and honor, the embodiment of the American fighting spirit. But behind the heroic image and the charming smile lay a man burdened with personal demons and strained relationships. Despite his stoic public persona, Murphy harbored deep resentments, mistrust, and even outright hatred towards certain people he encountered in both his military and Hollywood careers. Among all the figures he crossed paths with, there was one man who stood apart. A figure Murphy clashed with on a level that was not simply professional rivalry, but something far more personal. This wasn't just about business disputes or creative disagreements. It was about betrayal, pride, and the one thing Audie Murphy valued above all else: loyalty. For a man who had risked his life countless times on the battlefield, loyalty was sacred, and when someone violated that trust, Murphy's anger cut deep. The identity of the person Audie Murphy hated the most may surprise you. It was not an enemy on the battlefield, nor a Hollywood competitor jealous of his fame, but someone much closer and someone who tested the patience of a man already struggling with the weight of war memories and the demands of celebrity. To understand why Audie Murphy's hatred for a certain man ran so deep, we first need to revisit the extraordinary life that shaped him. Born into poverty in rural Texas in 1925, Murphy grew up in a family struggling through the Great Depression. His childhood was defined by hardship, responsibility, and the need to survive. When his father abandoned the family, Audie was forced to step into the role of provider at a very young age, working odd jobs to keep food on the table for his mother and siblings. These early struggles instilled in him a toughness that would later define both his military career and his Hollywood persona. When World War II broke out, Murphy, like many young men of his generation, enlisted to serve his country. Too small to be accepted by the Marines and the Navy, he was eventually taken into the Army. What followed was nothing short of remarkable. Through sheer courage, grit, and determination, Murphy became the most decorated American soldier of the war, earning the Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Stars, and countless other commendations. His bravery on the battlefield turned him into a national symbol, and his story was soon immortalized in books and films. But beneath the medals and the fame, Murphy carried scars that no audience could see. Like many veterans, he struggled with what we now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder. Sleepless nights, violent nightmares, and an ever-present sense of unease haunted him. To cope, he often carried a firearm even while sleeping. Fame may have made him a household name, but it also magnified his struggles, forcing him to balance a heroic public image with private battles that never fully subsided. When Hollywood came calling, Murphy's transition to acting seemed natural. He was cast not only because of his story, but also because of his natural charisma and rugged authenticity. Films like To Hell and Back, based on his own autobiography, cemented his place as both a war hero and a movie star. Yet Hollywood was not a battlefield of honor. Unlike the military, where loyalty and bravery meant everything, the entertainment industry was a world of egos, betrayals, and hidden rivalries. Murphy quickly learned that trust was rare, and betrayal could cut as deeply as any wound sustained in war. It was within this environment that Murphy encountered the man who would ultimately earn his deepest resentment. For Murphy, loyalty was non-negotiable. His entire worldview, forged in the fire of war, revolved around the belief that a man's word and his loyalty to comrades were sacred. When this trust was broken in Hollywood, where promises were often empty and alliances could shift overnight, Murphy's patience wore thin. And with one man in particular, the clash was so personal, so bitter, that it stood out even among his long career of battles, both on screen and off. This was not just a dispute about money or contracts. It was about integrity. Murphy believed that honor wasn't something reserved for the battlefield. It was something men carried into every part of their lives. And when he encountered someone who violated that principle, his reaction was fierce. This belief set the stage for one of the most talked-about grudges in classic Hollywood history. By the late 1940s, Audie Murphy had become a household name. His story of bravery captured the public imagination, and Hollywood quickly recognized his marketability. With his rugged good looks, unshakable composure, and the aura of a genuine war hero, Murphy was cast in war dramas, westerns, and adventure films. Unlike other actors of the era who built their reputations on make-believe, Murphy carried real battlefield experience, and audiences responded to his authenticity. Films like To Hell and Back and The Red Badge of Courage weren't just entertainment. They were powerful reminders of sacrifice and patriotism, with Murphy as the embodiment of both. But with fame came tension. Hollywood was not a place where loyalty or honor was guaranteed. In an industry driven by contracts, egos, and the constant pursuit of money, betrayal was common. For someone like Murphy, who valued brotherhood and truth above all else, navigating the politics of show business was disillusioning. It was during this period that Murphy crossed paths with an actor-turned-producer whose methods clashed directly with his values. This man, known for his charm and ability to manipulate, saw Murphy not as a comrade, but as a commodity to be exploited. At first, Murphy tried to remain professional. He was used to discipline and hierarchy, traits ingrained in him during his years in the army. He trusted easily at times, believing in the bonds forged by shared goals. But in Hollywood, those bonds were fragile. Contracts were broken, promises left unfulfilled, and friendships often turned into rivalries. For Murphy, betrayal wasn't just part of the business, it was personal. And when this particular man crossed him, the sting was deeper than most could imagine. The betrayal centered around a project Murphy had believed in, one that was supposed to showcase his talents and tell a story close to his heart. Instead, through a combination of broken promises and self-serving decisions, the producer undermined Murphy's vision and cut him out of key decisions. Murphy, who had risked his life countless times in the war, could not stand the idea of being disrespected or treated as expendable. For him, this wasn't just about money or screen time. It was about honor. The rivalry quickly became known behind the scenes. While Murphy rarely aired his grievances publicly, those close to him recalled the intensity of his anger. Unlike typical Hollywood feuds, this wasn't playful banter or competition for roles. This was real hatred. Murphy felt deceived, used, and mocked in a world he already found difficult to trust. The betrayal confirmed his suspicions about the entertainment industry, fueling his resentment not only toward the man who wronged him, but also toward the system that allowed such behavior to thrive. What made this particular conflict stand out was how deeply personal it became. Murphy, a man defined by his loyalty to his fellow soldiers, could not reconcile betrayal in civilian life. For him, Hollywood politics were a kind of battlefield, but one fought without honor, without courage, and without sacrifice. In that sense, the man he despised most was more than just an adversary. He was a symbol of everything Murphy loathed about the industry. This hatred, though rarely spoken about directly, would follow Murphy for years. It became one of the defining conflicts of his Hollywood career, shaping his outlook on the business and influencing his relationships with colleagues. For fans, it is a reminder that even heroes who seem larger than life can struggle with bitterness, anger, and disappointment when confronted with betrayal. The heart of Audie Murphy's bitterness lay in a simple but powerful truth. He measured men by their integrity. For Murphy, loyalty wasn't negotiable. In the army, men lived or died depending on whether they could rely on each other. It was a code he carried into every part of his life, including Hollywood. But the man Murphy came to despise most represented the very opposite of that code. Where Murphy believed in honesty and sacrifice, this individual thrived on manipulation, greed, and self-interest. Their clash was inevitable, and when it came, it burned into Murphy's memory. The project that ignited their feud was meant to be a defining moment for Murphy's career. He had trusted this man with both his reputation and his vision, believing they were working toward the same goal. Instead, Murphy discovered that promises were empty and that backroom deals had been struck without his knowledge. The betrayal stung not just because it hurt his professional standing, but because it violated the very principles that had guided his entire life. For a man who had survived the horrors of combat, nothing was worse than being stabbed in the back by someone he thought he could trust. Murphy's anger wasn't fleeting. Friends recalled how he could not bring himself to forgive or even tolerate the man who had wronged him. Unlike petty rivalries between actors competing for roles, this was different. Murphy's disdain was rooted in principle. To him, the betrayal confirmed everything he suspected about the darker side of Hollywood, that it was a place where loyalty meant nothing and honor was easily traded for profit. The grudge grew over time. On set, Murphy became more guarded, less willing to let people into his inner circle. His wariness was understandable. After experiencing betrayal so personal, he saw the entertainment industry as hostile territory, one where allies could turn into enemies overnight. The man he despised symbolized all of this. Every time Murphy heard his name or crossed paths with him, it reinforced his conviction that Hollywood was a battlefield of dishonor. Behind closed doors, Murphy was open about his feelings. He didn't hide his hatred when speaking with trusted friends. To them, it was clear that this feud had touched something raw inside him. It wasn't about ego or jealousy. It was about respect, or rather the lack of it. The betrayal had cut into the very foundation of who he was, a man who had built his life on sacrifice, trust, and brotherhood. Even as Murphy continued to act and find success, the bitterness lingered. It shaped his dealings with producers, directors, and co-stars. He learned to be cautious, to demand clarity in contracts, and to stand his ground when he felt his integrity was at risk. Yet the shadow of that single betrayal, and the man who caused it, followed him. In interviews, he never spoke the man's name directly. But those who knew the story understood exactly who he meant when he referred to being deceived in Hollywood. The feud revealed much about Murphy's character. While many in the industry shrugged off betrayals as just business, Murphy could not separate business from honor. For him, everything was personal, because his entire life had been built on personal sacrifice. That was what made the grudge so powerful, and why, among all the people he encountered, this man stood out as the one he truly hated. Audie Murphy may have carried a reputation for bravery and discipline, but when it came to his personal feelings, he was far less forgiving. Hollywood insiders often noted that Murphy didn't waste time pretending to like people he despised. He was fiercely loyal to friends, but equally unyielding toward those who crossed him. The person he truly hated more than anyone became a quiet yet defining part of his Hollywood story. While Murphy's films painted him as the ultimate American hero, behind the camera he lived with grudges that shaped his relationships and decisions. Some argue that his resentment came from feeling exploited by a system that profited from his name, but rarely respected him as an actor. Others believe his hatred was personal, directed at an individual who belittled his war record and treated him as nothing more than a publicity tool. In the years that followed, Murphy remained steadfast in his bitterness, even as his career slowed and his fame began to fade. Yet this hatred wasn't just destructive. It highlighted Murphy's unshakable pride and refusal to compromise his values. Unlike many stars who played the game to stay relevant, Murphy never bowed to pressure, even if it cost him roles and friendships. To this day, the story of the man Audie Murphy truly despised remains one of Hollywood's most whispered tales, a reminder that even the bravest heroes carried private battles no one else could fully understand.